Hey guys, welcome back. This is the second part of the video about the diameters. In the first video, we made the horizontal and vertical lines. In this part, we're going to be making the arrows and the little extension line with the value. So as we've seen in the first part, we're going to be making all these controllers. So we're going to be able to change the thickness or the radius. We're going to have this little extension line going on the right or the left, depending on the angle. Some more controls over the text, and we're going to link everything to this little slider to take care of the animation. We're going to add the splines of the range mappers in the controls to have direct access to the animation curves. So I'm going to hide the line. We're going to start off by creating a circle. The only purpose of this one is to be used as a visual reference. I'm going to set the radius to be 50 and I'm going to add a new null. I call this one diameter. I'm going to select the null and using shift, I'm going to create a mouse spline. I call this R1. In the mouse spline, in the object tab, you're going to set the display mode to line. Then we go to the next tab and we're going to change the H angle. I'm going to set this to 270. On the diameter, I'm going to add a first user data. This will be the radius. I want this to be reals and I want a float slider. I set the default value to 50. This step will be 001. And we're going to need an xpresso tag. I import the diameter, set its color to green. I import the radius. I import the mouse spline. So we want to change the length. I'm going to import it and connect the radius. The second value we need is the angle. So I call this one angle. This time we're going to use degrees. We're going to go from 0 to 360. By default, I'm going to set this to 0. I import that into the xpresso. We're going to be changing the P angle. So we connect that to the angle. So we're going to be able to change the radius, and here we can change the angle. For now, I'm going to set this to 60. So we're going to control drag the mouse spline, and this one will be R2. I'm going to just rotate this 180 degrees to have the second part. I control drag this and I import the second mouse spline. I connect the radius and the angle. So if I now change the angle, both mouse splines will rotate. Now we need the little arrows at the ends. I call this one arrow 1. I'm gonna add the white color. We need 1 disk segment and 3 in the rotation segments. With the disk selected, we're gonna hit Alt G to set it in a null. I call this one arrow 1 pivot. I'm gonna use an align to spline tag, and for the spline path, I'm gonna use R1. So spline 1 is this one. We're gonna set this to be tangent, and we set the position to 100. We're gonna adjust the orientation. I rotate it like this. I'm gonna reduce the size. I'm gonna control drag, call it arrow 2 pivot. And I call the disk arrow 2. And this one is going to follow R2. So it's going to be on the other side. With the disk selected, using shift, I'm going to add a plane. I'm going to hide it. I select the plane and set everything to 0. And we want to make it smaller on the Z axis. So I select it. I uncheck the position. In the deformer tab, I'm going to set it to object. In the parameters, I'm going to check the scale. And in the Z axis, I'm going to type in -0.6. We're going to drag and drop this one in the other disk. Then we're going to select the null and add a new user data, which will be arrow size. We want a float slider. We want reals. And the maximum will be 100. We're going to set the default value to 5 for now. I'm going to open the xpresso again. I import the diameter. We're gonna need the arrow size. I set this one to green. I'm gonna import the disks. And we wanna change the outer radius. I'm gonna connect this one directly. I'm gonna add a new plane. I call this one line plane. With the plane still selected, I'm gonna use Shift to add a spline wrap. For the spline wrap, we're gonna use the R1 spline. We're gonna change the orientation. It's gonna adjust to the length. I'm gonna import the plane and add a new math node. Connect the arrow size to the first input. And set the node to multiply. And I'm gonna multiply this by 0.2. We only need one width and height segments. And it's the height that we want to change. So I import it in the xpresso and I'm gonna connect this. I'm gonna hide the spline wrap. I'm gonna control drag the line plane and call it line plane 2. And for this one, we're gonna be using the secondmost spline. So we're gonna need to slightly change the length of the most splines. We want a slight offset depending on the size of the arrows. So we're gonna need a new user data, which will be the thickness. I'm gonna set this one to 0 for now. I'm gonna import it. We're gonna need the arrow size. Then we're gonna look for a formula node. So we want the radius, the thickness of the circle, and the arrow size. So I'm gonna select the formula node and we're gonna check use port names. So we want the radius, which is value 1. And we want to subtract the thickness and the arrow size. So this will be minus value 2 plus value 3 between parentheses. So this will be our new length value. So first, the arrows will be adjusted to the size of the circle. And now if you want, we're gonna be able to add some offset to the arrows. I'm gonna make a copy of R2. I'm gonna deactivate everything and we're gonna be left with just R3. And we want a little extend line with the value and we want it to follow the angle of the arrows. This is why we need a third line that touches the circle because we want the extend line to start from the circle. So I'm going to import R3. I need the length and the P angle. And this way I want the R3 following the angle of R2. So for the length, I directly use the radius. And for the angle, I just going to directly connect the angle. So for the extension line, I'm just going to copy R3 once more and call it line. So this will be the extension line. I'm going to add an align to spline tag on this one. As a reference, I'm going to use R3 and I'm going to set the position to 100%. And when I change the angle, the line is going to follow. We want this to be following in a tangential way. I'm going to set the P angle to 0. It's going backward. So we're going to set the H angle to 0 as well. So now it's aligned. I'm going to add a new line, which will be line extend. And this one is going to be aligned to the last line. So I select the tag and I'm going to select the last line as a reference. So the position is 100%. That's okay. But this time we don't want it to be tangential because we want this line to always stay horizontal. Like this. This little extension will always stay horizontal. So using this little tag will allow us to have this line always on the end of this line, but it will always keep its own orientation. When I change the angle, it's going to follow the previous line and it's staying horizontal as we want it. I'm going to activate everything. I'm going to hide those lines. We're going to add some user data for those lines. I call this one line length. I copy this one and I call this line extend. We're going to import that into the xpresso. I first import the diameter. I import the new lines. In the diameters, I'm going to get the line length and the line extend. So for the line, we're going to go to the simple tab. I'm going to get the length. I'm going to connect this to the line length. And for the extend, I'm going to do the same. And this way, we're going to have direct access to the length of the line and of the extension. At the end, we want to show the value. So we're going to go to MoGraph and we're going to add a MoText. I'm going to change the angle. We're going to be able to change this later. I want this line to be looking to the right. I'm going to move the text to the end. I'm going to hit Alt-G. This will be the text. I'm going to control drag the align to spline. For the path, we want the line extend. So it's aligned to the end of this line. I'm just going to move the angle over here. I'm going to control drag the line extend. This will be the text size. And we could add a text offset as well. So we import the main null. We're going to import the MoText. In the object tab, we're going to set the depth to 0. We're going to import the height as well as the X position. And for the diameter, we're going to import the text size and the text offset. I connect the text size to the height and the text offset to the X position. So here we can change the text size and the text offset. I'm going to set the offset to 1. I'm going to adjust the length. So I'm going to move it like that. And here we want a white line to link those two lines. And we would like to use a sweep. So we're going to have to link those two lines into only one line. So we're going to add a connect and add in the two lines. Here we are losing one of the lines. So we just have to reduce the tolerance. So for now, we still have two lines. So we're going to be using a tracer and we're going to trace those lines. So the connect was selected when I created the tracer. So the trace link is automatically linked to the connect. Something I wanted to point out, the file has been made in R19. And if you're using a newer version, you're going to have an issue on the little line. So what we can do here is just select the tracer object and delete the connect. And instead of using the connect, we're going to select directly the lines. So the line and line extend. And this should solve the problem. I'm going to hide the connect. And in the tracer, I'm going to connect all objects. The line we have here is now the tracer and it's not the connect anymore. So now we are able to use the sweep. We set the tracer inside and we're going to use another mospline that we call thickness. We're going to set the display to line. I'm just going to decrease the length. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees on the H angle. I'm going to import this to the xpresso and we're going to give it the same thickness as the arrow. So I move it here. I select it in the simple tab. I'm going to drag in the length. I connect it here. So we're going to have the same thickness as the line in the middle here. We just want to correct the offset. I'm just going to select this spline and in the offset, I'm going to type in -50. So this way, it's going to be centered on the arrow. So when I hit NB, we're going to see there are way too many segments. So I'm going to select the thickness, go to simple and set the steps to 2. We're going to select the other lines and set the steps to 2 everywhere. We're going to do the same for those ones. Okay, so it's going to look a little bit cleaner. Now we're going to be able to add some animation. So we're going to add a new data. Call this anim. We want percentages. I'm going to change the step and we're going to change the interface to be a float slider. At 0, I'm going to add a keyframe at 0%. And at frame 25, I'm going to add a new keyframe at 100. I'm going to right click, animation, show F-curve. Select the keyframes and make them linear. I'm gonna add a separator. So we first want to animate the arrows. We import the diameters and the animation slider. We're gonna import the range mapper. I'm gonna connect this here. I'm gonna animate from 0 to 40% of the animation, so 0.4. We add a math node. We connect this to the first input. We're gonna multiply this value and we connect this in the length. We're gonna connect this in the length of the second line as well. I set the color to blue. And don't forget to select the range mapper and to clamp the outputs to stop the animation when we are past 0.4. We're gonna change the curve. We select the range mapper. We control click to add points. We're gonna change the spline to ease out the end of the animation. I'm gonna move this window to the left. It will be easier. So we're gonna make some room for the small lines. I'm gonna copy the range mapper. I connect it to the animation slider. And this time we wanna go from 0.4, so 40% of the animation slider to 100%. We can directly import the sweep. And as we have percentages on both sides, we can directly connect both. If you have a look, it's looking like this. Maybe on the little line, I wanna change the curve to smooth the animation at the beginning and at the end. I'm gonna import the text. I'm gonna add a new math node and simply connect the range mapper going from 0 to 1. And we're gonna multiply the radius. I set the function to multiply and we connect this to the text. And we're gonna have the text animated depending on the animation of the line. So I don't really like the float here. So I'm gonna add a float function and set the function to floor. We're gonna connect this in between. And this way we're gonna just have an integer. We want the text to be only visible when the line is starting to animate. So we're gonna select the text. We go to the basic tab. We're gonna get the enable value. We're gonna use a compare node. We're gonna connect the animation and connect this and connect the compare node to the enable. We're gonna select the compare and we wanna check if it's bigger than 0.4. So as soon as the second line is animating, it's going to be visible. So for the values of the beginning and ending of the animation, we could add them inside the controls here. We could also import the range mapper graphs. So this is quite easy. We could just go to the user datas, add a new one. And as a data type, we could just use a spline. So I call this one spline arrows. And spline text. So we could move spline arrows over there, having a new separator. So if I hit OK, the controls would look like this. We could even rename them, like calling this one arrows, this one text. So it's easier to read. We would have the animation here, everything about the arrows over here, and last we're gonna have the text. Now we could select the diameters and import the splines, and selecting the range mapper, we could select the spline. Same for this one. This one is the range mapper of the text. And this one is for the arrows. So if I just connect that, the animation is back to linear. So we're going to have to redraw the splines in the controller. So what we did in the range mappers before, we can now do this directly in the controller. So for the last tools we did together, we could do the same. We could add some spline user data in the controls and connect them in the range mapper. So we could really import everything in a main controller without going back to the xpresso to fine-tune the animation. So as those splines are controlling the animation, I could move them just next to the animation slider. So everything about the animation is in the same place. The controller starts to be quite complex. So instead of using separators, we could be adding some groups. So I'm gonna add a group. I'm gonna control drag this twice. I'm gonna call the first one anim, a second one for the arrows, and a third one for the text. So everything that's about animation, I'm gonna set it in there. I'm gonna delete the separator. This is all about the arrows. And those are the text parameters. I delete the separator. We're gonna be able to close those groups and only see what we need. So we can just work on the arrows or just the text and hide those huge graphs. Something else is we know that the first part of the animation takes place between 0 and 40% of the animation, and the second part from 40% to 100. So we could add that in the controllers as well. So I'm gonna copy the animation slider. I'm gonna call this anim change. I'm gonna set the default value to 40%. So I'm gonna import the anim change. And on the range mapper, we got the input upper. So I don't know why, but we cannot import those values from the attributes directly, but we can just click in the blue corner here and select the input upper. On this one, it's going to be the input lower. And in the compare, we are checking if it's bigger than 0.4. We could just select the new data and connect it to the second input instead. By doing that, we are able to choose if we want the animation to be quicker on the arrow or on the extension. We can now just change this in the slider directly, or we can do the opposite and have the arrow really slow and the extension really quick. So this way we can adjust those three values just with a little slider, which can be quite handy. I'm gonna go back to 40. At frame 0, we're gonna have a little issue. We can see the arrowheads in the middle here. So we're just gonna import the diameter, the animation slider. We get a new compare. We're gonna import the arrows, arrow 1 and arrow 2. And connect the animation to the first input. In the compare, we just want to check if the animation is not at 0. I select arrow 1, I import the enabled. I'm going to do the same on arrow 2. I connect this. So at 0, the arrows are deactivated. And as soon as the animation is greater than 0, we're going to see them. In the user data, we're going to add another checkbox to decide whether or not we want to see the arrows. If, for example, we have a really small circle, we won't be able to have the arrows inside. Maybe in this case, we just want the value. So I'm going to add a new data. I set this to Boolean. I call this line only. I'm going to move that to the arrows parameters. Here it is. I'm going to add a new null. I'm going to set everything about the arrows inside the null. I'm just going to increase the radius a little bit to see something. I call this one center. So we're going to need this part. We're going to set everything in there. And now we just can hide or unhide this null. So I import it. I import the checkbox. For the center, I'm going to import the visible in editor and visible in renderer. We're going to connect that. And when I now check the line only, we're going to hide the arrows. I'm going to go back to my default values. So the last thing we want to do is when the angle switches to the left, we would like the extension line to switch to the left as well. We're going to test that. I'm going to import the diameter. I get the color. And this time we're going to check the angle. So to check that, we're going to add a little plane. We're going to set this over there. This is just to have a quick visual feedback. I'm going to import it. we're going to get the enable, we're going to get a compare node, and we're going to try to define if the text is on the right. So between 90 degrees and 270. So we're going to check this using a compare. We want this to be bigger than 90. 180 degrees is equal to pi. So in the compare, the parameter tab, I just type in pi divided by 2. This is 90 degrees, but in radians. So if that's true, I just connect that. If the value is bigger than 90 degrees, so the plane should be active. When I go below 90, you see the plane disappears. So this is working. Then we want to check if you are below 270. I'm going to copy the compare node. So this one is bigger than 90. And on this one, we want to be inferior. Pi is 180. So I just type in pi. If I'm below 180, the plane is going to be visible. We just want to add pi divided by 2. So we just want to add 90 degrees. So in the compare node, we just add plus pi divided by 2. So this gives us 4.7. So we are checking if we are below 270. And on this one, we check if you are above 90. So if this one is true, it's going to output 1. We're going to be able to define if those two are true at the same time by adding the two outputs together. I'm going to go for a new math add. So if both are true at the same time, we should have a result of 2. So if I reduce the angle, here we are below 270. So we're going to have only 1 that's true. The result is 1. If I increase the angle to 120, both are true. We're going to have a value of 2. And here we are above 90, but at the same time we are above 270. So this doesn't work. The result will be 1. I'm going to add a new compare. I connect the input and the output. And for this one to be true, we want the value to be equal to 2. And if I now change the angle, the plane is only visible when we are on the right side. We want to change this line, so I'm going to import it. And we want to change the H angle. I'm going to import it. We're going to need a condition. We're going to connect the compare to the switch. And we're going to connect the condition to the angle. What we did before with the radians, we could make this differently. It was just to show you how to calculate directly in the text field. You could simply add a constant and a degree node, connecting a result. I select the degree node and the function will be degrees to radians. For the constant value, we're going to type in 90. So we get back the 1.5 that we had before. If I type in 270, we get the same result as what we calculated before in the compare. So 1.5 and 4.7. So if we are on the right side, the result will be 1. So it's going to be the second input. And if we are on the left side, it's going to be the first input. On the right side, we want the angle to be at 0. If we are on the left side, we want to connect this in the first input. Here we don't want 270, we want 180. Now when I move the angle, the line is going the right way. We just have to correct the text position. We're going to import the mode text. We're going to copy the condition, connect the switch. On the text, there are two things we want to change. We want to change the alignment. I'm going to put it there. I connect it to the condition. So as we've seen before, when we are on the right, it's the second value. The second input can stay at 0 and the text will be aligned to the left. So depending on the output here, we're going to be aligning to the left, to the middle, or to the right. The value for left is 0, 1, and 2. So on the right side, we want to align the text to the left. so the value is 0. And on the left side, we want to align the text to the right. So for the first input, we're going to type in 2. When I change the angle, it's going to be aligning to the left or to the right. We just have to change the offset now. So we already defined that up there. So I'm going to select those nodes and move them down. So here we define the height and the position. I'm going to copy the condition. I'm going to connect it back to the compare. If we are on the right side, I'm going to connect the offset directly to the second input and in the position. And on the left side, we want the opposite. So I'm going to add a math node. I connect it. I set this to multiply and I want to multiply by -1. And finally, I connect this to the first input. If I now increase the offset, when I now move the angle, the offset is going in the right direction. So this is it for the diameter. We could now bring back the lines we did in the last video. I'm going to just rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to control drag, set it to vertical. So we have our little animated diameter. We could select both lines, make them shorter, play around with the parameters. I'm going to increase the timeline to 50 frames. We could now offset the animation of the arrow. So we got the little animation here. Okay, so this was the last video of this little series. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.